Welcome to Back from the Abyss. I'm Dr. Craig Heacock. I got a letter a couple weeks ago that I wanted to read to all of you because I think it brings up a very interesting issue. So here's how the email starts. Dear Dr. Heacock, I'm a huge fan of your podcast and have just finished listening to your most recent episode, The Dark Side of Psychedelics. I found your interview with Devin thought-provoking and balanced, as is the case with all of your interviews. I appreciate your willingness to sit with the tension between individual freedom and access to psychedelics on the one hand, and medicalization and patient safety on the other. I mostly agree with your support of platforming harm reduction and safe underground psychedelic work. One issue I wish you had raised in your interview is the phenomenon of spiritual narcissism. The underground psychedelic world seems particularly susceptible to these types of healers, the ones who have developed an inflated confidence in their own powers of discernment. When I hear your guest repeatedly deferring to her inner voice when making decisions about whether or not to illegally treat people with psychedelics, I cringe a lot, especially because she is a licensed professional who is elevating her personal ethics above the standards set by her regulatory board. It seems at odds to advocate for ethical and safe boundaries around healing work while violating a clear legal boundary set by her own licensing board, a body that exists specifically to protect patients from therapists who violate boundaries. Thanks again for your incredible podcast. I appreciate how you take your listeners into darker psychological terrain while holding difficult and complex conversations with curiosity and compassion. Oh, that's a sweet letter. Thank you. And yeah, the writer brings up such a good issue. And first of all, I would say I have not yet done an episode specifically on this topic of psychedelic narcissism because I think Laura Northrup did it so beautifully in her podcast, Inside Eyes. So for all of you who are interested in this, go to Inside Eyes, check out episode 16, which is called The Dynamics of Sexual Harm in Psychedelic and Entheogenic Spaces. It's just a must listen for anyone who's interested in psychedelic work. And I would also say, I agree with the writer that, when underground therapists are isolated and necessarily kind of in the dark and separate, they can fall into their own kind of mistaken beliefs and hypotheses. I talked about this, I think it was last season, where I described one of my attendings in residency who would always say, if you go into private practice, be very careful because you're going to get wacky. You're going to start believing your own wacky ideas and making wacky treatment choices. And I think what he was getting at is kind of what the writer is getting at here, is that underground therapists are at great risk of just relying on their own intuition and discernment, when really what should be happening, I think, is what happens in both the Western medical tradition and even the shamanic South American tradition, which is that shamans apprentice for years and years and years with expert shamans, and they learn from them, and they learn sort of the ropes and the rules and how to hold a container and who's appropriate and who's not. And that seems to work pretty darn well, at least it has for centuries. And in the US, we have the allopathic Western medical model where same thing. In a psychiatric residency, for example, you apprentice with both higher level residents and very experienced attendings, and you learn to do psychiatry on the apprentice model. And I agree with the writer that there are definitely huge risks when underground therapists now are also siloed. And if they're not careful, they can easily fall into kind of believing their own self-justifications and rationalizations. So thank you for that letter. After our first season, Chris and I had a brainstorming session, and he told me, we got to do an episode on gender. It's such a huge topic right now. And my first thought was, great idea. And my immediate next thought was, oh man, I could get myself into a world of hurt on this. Because talking about gender, especially for me, a hetero, cis, white dude in his mid-50s, this seems kind of like walking into the flames of a conversation that I'm only just beginning to understand. I did tuck this idea away, however, thinking that if the right storyteller came along, that we should definitely explore gender and the psychiatric darkness that can accompany gender dysphoria. I knew right away when I met today's guest, Autumn, that we'd found just the right person. Autumn was assigned male at birth, but she sensed from a very young age that something was wrong. This is her journey through denial, awakening, and then transitioning both hormonally and surgically. Autumn brings a fascinating and unique perspective to this whole arena of gender and identity. In my conversation with Autumn, I try my very best to speak about the sensitive and personal issue of gender identity with thoughtfulness and with respect. And if I make any errors or offend anyone during the story, I want to apologize up front, and I invite you to reach out to me and let me know where I went astray. Was there a time or age where you realized, okay, I am a girl, I'm feminine, I'm in the wrong body? Like, was it a kind of eureka moment, or was it something that just sort of slowly evolved over time?
Sure.
That you were able to put words to that?
Yeah. So it was an unfolding over time for sure. Partly because I didn't have a lot of information about what it would be like to be transgender, because if I had, it would have become immediately obvious to me as a 13-year-old or 11-year-old or whatever that, oh yeah, that's me. Hard stop. Like, there's no reason to believe that's not me. But I didn't have that information. And I also really started to fill out my faith when I was 11 to 13 years old, around in that age, and really strongly in middle school. It's really felt very strongly. And at that time, there was a big push to, to say that being gay was wrong and all that. And it's a choice. And so I really wanted to embrace that because my faith became very important to me. I turned to faith as a way to really help cope with my parents being divorced, my dad not being in my life, a lot of different heartache and hurts that in the church I felt acceptance, where I didn't feel acceptance at home. Even if I was a little bit weird, as long as I said I was heterosexual, they were okay with it. And that worked for me for a while.
During adolescence, and going to church, are you trying really hard to look like a boy?
Oh, yeah, of
like
course. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the big moments for me, going back to the original question of what was it for me? Was there any kind of snap your fingers or eureka kind of moment? One moment was when I was reading my Bible, and this is after a period of time where my mom was getting after me for quote unquote walking around the house like a girl or acting gay, and classmates calling me gay, et cetera, and me being like horrified by all of that because I wanted to act out the part I thought I was supposed to be playing, that my faith told me was where I was supposed to be, and not really knowing where to put that. Reading a passage in the Bible where it talks about the effeminate will not inherit the kingdom of God. And that was probably the first moment for me where I went, I am that.
There's a line that says that?
In some translations.
The effeminate.
In some, it's a whole list, but that's one of them in the list. I just took that information and went, oh, okay, well, that's important to me. And so at that point I was like, wow, how do I, then I went on a journey. Like, that was the point where I feel like that kind of started my journey towards trans denial for myself. Whereas before, I just kind of existed and floated through life. I think I was probably dealing a lot more with the trauma of my mom being an alcoholic and dealing with I would say at that point, mild abuse. It ramped up the older I got, the more the abuse ramped up, honestly. But even then it was, trying to deal with that and find my place and figure out who I was kind of secondary to survival. So I didn't think about it a lot, which maybe was okay. Abuse is terrible and it was not a good place, but I think dwelling on it, I wouldn't have gotten the support that I needed from my mom. That much was true. From the times of her telling me I threw like a girl, which I did. I'm not even going to deny that. And I wasn't hurt by that. That was fine with me. I was like, yeah, and what's your problem? Is that something that's bad? It was weird to me that she would say that. And so, yeah, I would say that was a really huge watershed for me when I read that, and felt like what I needed to do was really work hard to fit that male stereotype. And that was the beginning of the journey.
So you used, that Bible verse, and you were diving deeply into your faith as a way to sort of shut this down.
Right, exactly.
Shut down this emerging feminine persona, this trans thing. If you study it hard enough,
That's what I was told. And I wanted to believe that because the church is the one place I found acceptance. Really, I mean, I had family and my family was great. And if any of my family members listen to this, I did not feel accepted by you. Uh, don't hear that. But certainly feeling at home and in family and with people who genuinely cared and loved, that was my faith community. And that was what it was to me to be a Christian. Mm-hmm. And so of course I wanted to do the right thing there. Of course I did, because I wanted to be accepted. I wanted that love, and I knew it was freely available there. Mm-hmm. As long as I did the right things, which I know sounds really cringy, and it is to some degree really cringy. And they would have loved me even if I had come out at that age. Like the churches that I was a part of, looking back, I was really fortunate to be a part of churches that, even if they didn't fully accept the fact that LGBT was a thing that people just lived through versus a sin, they would have come around me and supported me and not shunned me like happens in so many faith communities in our country.
That was.
It was.
Yeah, because there's definitely been stories on this podcast where people were in churches that were very shaming and dividing and pointing out all the ways that you were not right. But it sounds like your faith community was very supportive.
Yeah, for sure. And I think they took pity on me to some degree because I didn't come with my family. I might have had a different story if I'd come with my family, but I was going on my own. Like I didn't have anyone around me. It was just me as a 13-year-old showing up on the doorstep, and they're like, "Who are you? Who are you with?" I'm like, nobody. I came myself.
And how much were you going? How much of that attendance was you trying to fix yourself or shut this down versus just your love of being in a faith community and Christianity?
I think it was the acceptance more than it was me trying to shut anything down. The shutting down piece only came from the place of wanting to really live into that faith and wanting to do it well. So for me, it was the other way around. It was all about me feeling accepted and part of a community, part of a faith family.
What about dating? So during this time as a teenager, before you embraced who you were and what you needed to do, you were dating boys, girls.
Girls. Yeah, I was dating girls. Yeah, no boys.
Dating girls, but maybe wishing you were dating boys.
I didn't really wish for anything. That's the funny part is, for the most part, I think some people probably thought I was gay because I didn't really date at all. Like I had a couple of girlfriends here and there. I don't think I'm gray sexual, but I think I probably, in order to protect myself, I probably kind of crawled into that orientation a little bit because it was just too difficult for me already trying just to figure out how to act like a guy. It was too difficult for me to really figure out how to date. Now, what's interesting about that is there was a girl that I started dating my junior year, and eventually in my senior year, I asked her to marry me. And then we had a long engagement, got married. We're married for 10 years,
had 4
kids.
Of high school.
My senior year of high school.
Wow.
That's right. Yeah. And we didn't get married until we were both halfway through college and more. But yeah, we had some kids together and 10 years of marriage, and she put up with all of that.
How far into that marriage did you realize this is not going to work?
About 3 months. No, probably less, probably like 1 month, but not for reasons why you might think. Like I realized that maybe we just really weren't as compatible as I thought. And I was pursuing marriage in part because it normalized me and it gave me a family. Not that I didn't love her. I definitely did. I was head over heels, but you can have head over heels relationships outside of your orientation. It's just when you get to the romantic side of that and the intimacy piece of that, that can become really difficult. And it turned out to be the case for us as well. I felt like a failure because, men are supposed to be like really sexual beings, like really hungry for sex kind of people. And I wasn't. Like, it just, like, I wanted that intimacy for sure. But trying to make that work through my body and my body parts was really hard. I was happy in many ways, and I was really satisfied with the marriage. And I knew it wasn't going to work. And about a month in, I felt like I had made a mistake. Mm-hmm. But then I just kind of went, well, I married her. I made a commitment. I made a promise, and I wanted to make that work. And it wasn't that I didn't love her. It just was obvious that it was going to be hard. Mm-hmm.
It seems like once you become a sexual being, because that's already such a vulnerable thing to do anyway, but to be a sexual being, to be sexually aroused, to sexually connect with someone, and it seems like that would have to bring your, body dysphoria and gender just to the surface.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're getting aroused and you're thinking, I don't know what, I would like to hear more about what you're thinking, but it just seems like that would be a point where you could no longer avoid the reality.
Yeah, that's right. It was weird for me because I thought, okay, this is it. I waited for marriage to engage in sexual activity. And so here I am, married. It's like, okay, now we're going to have this awesome, intimate experience, as most females expect is going to happen. This just amazing, like, mind-blowing experience, whatever. We're together, and it didn't happen. And in part because I couldn't pull it off. Like, I couldn't do it. And I think
you couldn't get aroused sexually?
I was aroused, but I wasn't erect. And so I couldn't do it. Like, it was really difficult. Yeah, my penis and I didn't really see eye to eye on things. Nope. Not to be too weird about it. But yeah, like, it was just so bizarre to me that I had this thing on my body that didn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Was it like disgusting to you or awkward or ugly, or was it more just sort of confusing and non sequitur? Because I've heard people describe it different ways.
Yeah, I think trans people experience it both ways, and I think it really just depends on how much dysphoria they have to deal with in order to get through day to day. My dysphoria was managed to the point where I could live, for various definitions of the word live, and so it wasn't disgusting to me. I think the more dysphoria you feel, the more those things feel disgusting. And I was always trying to make it feel more integrated, but it felt disintegrated. Like it definitely felt like I like that word, non sequitur, because it really just felt separate or otherworldly, like not a part of me. Mm-hmm. Which is frustrating because it's like, well, this is my body. I don't know. Like, why does that feel weird? Is this a normal experience? It's clear it's not a normal experience. At some point in the future, she ended up cheating on me. So I'm assuming she wasn't very fulfilled in our relationship. So
and this whole time that you're with her, 8 years, 10 years?
10 years.
So 10 years.
Married, yeah. Are
you starting to read or hear or think about this idea that maybe what's going on is that you're trans, that's the core problem?
Yeah. So before we had kids, I don't know if it was Dateline. It was one of those, news shows that came on. And we were married by that point, and I was doing a co-op. And this program came on about this transgender person that had been married for a number of years and realized he just couldn't do it anymore. And he was she, and went through life, transitioned after She turned, say, I think it was, I don't remember her age when she transitioned, but they kind of documented the whole thing. And, I must have been at the edge of my seat, just absolutely locked to the TV, because towards the end of the program, my wife turned to me and she said, "If you ever do that to me, I'll leave you." And I was like, whoa. But then I realized how engaged I was in the program. I'm like, okay, well, I guess you saw that. I still had this picture of a Christian marriage where you don't get divorced and all of that. And even through being betrayed in that marriage and that sort of thing, I wanted to see that work. But there came a point where it was obvious to me that it wasn't going to, and I was pretty hurt. There's a lot of things that she, for lack of better words, was subjected to from me because I was dealing with that and spent a lot of energy focused on trying to maintain my gender and make sure that that was acceptable and appropriate so that I could inherit the kingdom of God and I wasn't effeminate. Because I was still operating in that context at that point. Yeah. After I got divorced, I met another woman that she and I got married pretty shortly thereafter. We've been together. We're still together. We've been together for 12 years. I think that's right. 12 years. We had a lot of successes, I would say. And whether it was my career or we adopted some kids, and that felt really good. And I started running out of things to do to keep myself occupied, and keeping myself occupied was one of the primary ways from high school on up that I used to really make sure that I didn't have to think about my gender at all. Like I didn't have to grapple with any of that. I didn't have to think about, I didn't really have to I could self-reflect. I didn't have any problems doing that in areas that were accessible, but in the areas that weren't accessible, I was running from, and gender was obviously one of those, right? And so I did everything that I could to stay as far away from gender as possible. And that meant working 24/7. That meant making sure I had 25 irons in the fire when I had capacity for 10, being a good father, for example, was for lots of good reasons, that was important to me too. But one of the reasons certainly that I wanted to be perceived as a good father was so that I could be perceived as a man that was worth the honor of a man, even though I knew that I wasn't, because I'm not. When I came out to my wife, her first response was, "Oh, thank God you're not gay." By this point, I thought I really had the routine down. I really felt like I was doing a really good job of acting the male part. I wore the right clothes. I had specific safe clothes in my closet that I would wear every day. I was very rigid about those sorts of things. I had to be. There couldn't be any chinks in that armor, because as soon as it actually did start coming off, as soon as there were actually chinks in that armor, it was a waterfall.
What about sexually with your second wife? Was it different? And for you, again, you are a sexual being, yet you're in the kind of the wrong body. Did you somehow, were you able to kind of stuff that down better, or did you suffer just as much in the second marriage with that?
I think we clicked a little bit better, and so it was a little easier for me to shove that down. At first, especially, I think over time that became harder and harder for me, which was really hurtful for her, because she felt like she did something wrong or wasn't attractive or anything like that. And none of that was true. And it was killing me, because I'm like, I can't solve this problem. I couldn't fix it.
Was it that you had sexual desire for her, but the plumbing was wrong, if you will?
Absolutely.
So the desire was there, but when you looked at the reality of your body and how you function as a sexual being, it took away any sort of heat?
It wasn't that it took it away. It was that it just didn't connect. I had to have appropriate narrative to make it work, which got in the way of intimacy. Like I could have intimacy without sex, or I could have sex without intimacy most of the time. She felt like it was her, something that she did or whatever. And there was just no way to convince her that it wasn't that. It was just all my internal struggle around gender. Mm-hmm. I think my wife and I were really growing apart because of the intimacy piece. And so I was feeling more and more alone. I couldn't really forge good male friendships, and I was afraid to forge female friendships. Yeah, it was just a combination of all those things together that it just made it to where I was starting to spiral down more and more and just feel more, I wouldn't even call it depression. It was just kind of this, it was just kind of just darkness. It was just deep darkness. I wasn't even really very depressed. I was still like really happy and satisfied with a lot of things, but just realized something wasn't right. In the midst of all of that, all of those different things that I was grappling with, it just felt like it wouldn't resolve. You know, years and years have gone by and it just doesn't go away. It doesn't get any better. What is going on? I finally was like, okay, I'm going to go see a counselor. I'm going to go figure this out. I don't know what it is though. I mean, basically what my struggle there was, it's like, I want to see a counselor, but what am I supposed to say? You know, oh, please help. My life has turned out wonderfully. And I'm really happy with it, but I'm really very sad. And, I'm going to cry just thinking about it. Oh, one of the things from 12-step programs that I had learned about being around them and being in Al-Anon myself for a little while was one of the steps is to take a fearless assessment. They call it different things in different programs, and I'm like, why don't I just do that here? I don't really know what's going on, but something's not right. And of course, gender was not the first thing that came to mind. I was still in a place where I thought that was off limits. And it was a choice. I was still operating from this context. It was a choice. So of course that wasn't on the table. Of course. And I'd lived in so many years of denial, there was no way that was going to be on the forefront. I just thought wearing dresses was just that was just something that was, mildly provocative or perverted or whatever that people say it is. So those are kind of the things I wrote that off as. I didn't really ever want to explore any of that. And I kept it kind of up on this shelf of infinite queerness, I would call it. Now I call it that. Before it was just a shelf. God forbid it be queer. But so I would put, that's kind of where I would put that stuff. If I felt like I wanted to wear a dress or buy a purse, or I was interested in shoes, even that was something I totally engaged in. Anyway, my wife calls me a shoe whore. I wear that badge honorably. So, but yeah, if there was anything like that would happen, or I found a man attractive or whatever, I had a shelf for that, and I would put that up on my mental shelf. So kind of to some degree, I got up the courage to go examine that shelf. That's really what happened there.
In therapy?
No, before I got there, because I didn't know what I was going to talk about. So this kind of fearless assessment that I did for myself was part of it, was just visiting that shelf and realizing that I'm not heteronormative. I'm not, cisgendered. There's something different about me, and I need to really understand this now. And then through therapy and just more self-exploration, lots of reading, and that sort of thing.
Can you say more about how you worked through some of that in therapy? I mean, how did your therapist help you explore this, question this, understand it, move through it? Because it's a lot. I mean, you've spent many, many years, a ton of mental and emotional energy just trying to keep this shut down.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that my therapist did for me was to give me permission to actually explore my gender. Like for real, not just, and be a good sounding board for me, like just to be able to say, I think this is maybe what's going on. And instead of saying, yes, that's what's going on, she would say, well, yeah, that could it be this? Would this work for you? Let's try this. Some of the things we worked on was early on was like trying to manage the dysphoria instead of hiding it. So instead of burying it, how can we manage it? But still, I kind of function through my day to day, as a man. And she helped me just try to explore that space. Or if I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. Well, what are some ways that you could feel more comfortable in your body and help your dysphoria? She and I would have those kinds of conversations.
So a lot of
super
practical
helpful,
strategies.
just practical strategies.
Like how do you get through the minute, hours, and days with this dilemma? Yeah.
Right. And I wasn't sure I wanted to live out. I wasn't sure that I wanted, I found a therapist that I felt wasn't going to push me towards the Christian theology side of it or try to do anything to talk me out of it. And I definitely didn't want anyone that was going to try to talk me into it. I mean, I was definitely still coming from a place where I'm not sure this is okay. And maybe I need conversion therapy or something, gasp. Obviously, I'm so glad I didn't land there, because that was definitely the wrong answer. Because there's just no converting this. It's not something that's going to go away because I wish it to. I tried that approach very earnestly. It did not work.
Was it through the process of therapy that you decided to come out and start transitioning? Were those all primarily issues in therapy, or did that come in other parts of your life?
I think it was therapy definitely helped. I mean, considering trying to do social transition. Let's start with that.
And define that, would you?
Yeah. Social transitioning is where you move through life, try to appear as the gender you are versus the gender you were assigned. That's maybe the best way to think of it. So you're not taking any hormones. There's no intervention medically. You're just wearing dresses instead of pants or whatever, or you wear women's pants or different kind of underwear, whatever you need to do to feel more put together. Yeah.
And that sounds like hormones and surgery are their own big steps, and we'll talk about those.
Right.
But the social transitioning in some ways sounds the scariest, because you're putting yourself out there early in this process. And surely people are going to wonder, what's going on? What are you doing? Are you trans? Are you just play acting? I mean, it seems really, I hadn't thought of that, this first stage of social transitioning being maybe the scariest.
Oh, I was terrified. Oh, yeah. No, I was absolutely beside myself because I knew I needed to do it. I got to the place where I realized, no, in fact, I need to live as a woman in the world. That's just what I'm going to have to do to just feel normal. And I hate that word, but that's how I feel. Legitimately, I feel normal now. And it's a good feeling. But yeah, when I got to that place, I'm like, oh, Lord have mercy. What am I going to do with this? Because I know what those attitudes are, and I know what people think. And I know you see all the memes and the clips of people being rude to transgender people, or transgender people having a moment, right? It's not sir, and and just all of just really the social angst. We have a lot of social angst around transgender issues and transgender people, and discomfort with that and feeling that it's uncanny. One of my coworkers, I have to tell this story. One of my coworkers, very, very liberal, extremely liberal, like left of anyone else I know liberal. I came out to him and he was grateful that I told him. And I said, hey, I'm probably going to start wearing dresses and skirts and stuff. Like sometimes I'm going to do that.
He was the first person that you told.
He was not the first person that I told. No, no, he was not. But when I told him, and I told him that, and we shared an office, which is part of the reason why I didn't say that to everyone, but I definitely said that to him. And he's like, I don't feel comfortable with that. I know, right?
Wow.
You just gave me this look like, wait, what?
That's not what I thought you were going to say.
Right. I know. And of all the people of all of my colleagues, he was the one I was least concerned about. And I was floored when he said that. And I thought, this isn't really a left-right issue. This is just makes some people uncomfortable because they don't understand it. And so what came to mind in my head when I saw his discomfort was, I said, there's that stereotypical picture of the big, burly, bearded man in a poofy pink dress, right? You probably know what I'm talking about. And that's the stereotype I feel like a lot of people think of when they think of that. And I said, it's not going to be that. And is that okay? Mm-hmm. And he was like, we'll see. And he was fine with it. But God bless him. I mean, he was honest at least. And it really like helped me understand that this isn't really a left-right issue. I mean, I know people want it to be because that really helps them understand it. Well, it helps them feel like they understand it. Let's say that. But it tended to kind of work out in public. And the more I got comfortable with myself, the more it worked. Like I would go to the auto parts store to get something for my car, and, the guy across the counter would be emphatically, sir, instead of just thinking that they were addressing me politely, he was intentionally addressing me impolitely, and of course, so I got those sorts of things. I understand why my trans brothers and sisters and siblings get upset about being misgendered when it's obvious. And there are times when I've been deeply distressed by being misgendered. Like if I feel like I'm in a safe space. This happened once when I was in one of my doctor's offices where they're actually supporting my transition. And I'm standing there with a purse over my shoulder. And I've got boobs, by this point, and dressed very femininely. And the receptionist just kind of glanced over her shoulder. She was super busy. I even feel bad about telling this story. But, she just quickly glanced over her shoulder and she said, I'll be right with you, sir. Mm. And I was devastated. Yeah. like it takes a lot to devastate me, but that was a situation. So if I feel like my guard's down and I'm in a place where I feel like I'm really safe and I get like, I feel even intentionally misgendered or even just unintentionally misgendered, but it's, it's just like, wow, It just sets me back.
Yeah. Would you say that for you, and obviously it's different for different people, but was it psychologically darker pre-transition and trying to stuff all that and deal with that, or did it get darkest when you actually said, no, this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to socially transition and then do hormones, then do surgery? Because I could imagine potentially that all stages of that could have some really hopeless and even suicidal kind of times.
The darkness shifted. I'm not sure it was better or worse, just different. So instead of the darkness being internal and something that it was like, instead of wrestling myself, I started wrestling other things. So it really affected our marriage negatively, for example. And we had a great marriage. And we still do in a lot of ways. It's been difficult because, my wife wanted a husband and I took that away from her, and I feel comfortable using those words, even though I know for myself, I only because that's the way I feel about it. And that's kind of the way she feels about it too. And we've talked about it, and it's not a very healthy approach. I want to say that loud and clear. That's not a healthy way to think about it, but it works for us because it helps us grapple with it. Really, I mean, she married me and, and that's the thing. Poor thing. She married me. But, and so it's just been a lot for her to process. So those are some of my darkest days because she's my buddy. She's my confidant. She's my lover. And so, yeah, that's been really hard.
Yeah. And you've already gone through the pain of divorce once. And
yeah, definitely don't want to do that again. So the darkness shifted there. And I felt her. The other thing that breaks my heart is I felt her and saw her grapple with an identity crisis that I had in myself. So I transferred that to her when I came out. I didn't want that for her, but she's like, she had to deal with that. So I crawled out of the hole, so to speak, out of that darkness, self-darkness, and she crawled into it. And so it's just it was a different kind of darkness. I've been on HRT for 2 years, 4 months. Yep, that's right. 2 years, 4 months. I've been out for really 5.5. So whatever that math is.
roughly 2.5, 3.
Yeah, it was socially transitioned for 2.5 years. And the first 6 months of that was me trying to make it slow. It wasn't as slow as I like to believe. It was kind of all at once, but I tried to definitely let the air out of the balloon slowly there. But yeah, so I would say fully out for probably 2 years. Yeah, before I started HRT, which felt like an eternity.
Yeah. The transition with HRT, tell me about that. Again, I recognize this, everyone has different experience, but
yeah,
you, went from being infused with testosterone to female hormones. And in my experience, seeing that with patients I work with is people often start thinking and feeling and being very different.
Yeah. I would say for me, the difference, it was wonderful to be on HRT for me because I finally felt whole, like in an internal sort of way. I'll probably say that word a lot, whole, because every step of the way I felt more whole. Starting HRT, wasn't like a switch, but within the first month when I cried, it felt productive for the first time ever. And I felt like my emotions were real. And I was before transitioning, I was still a very emotional person. Cry at beer commercials, like whatever, like it didn't matter. Do
you feel like you got more emotional or that your sort of emotional palette expanded?
Yeah. So let's talk about that. I felt like my emotional palette expanded and I got way less emotional. So I think some of the emotion was coming from just small ways of letting the air out of the balloon from pressure, because once I let that pressure off and I just cried because of like real emotions, not beer commercial or whatever, watching a silly show or something that wouldn't necessarily isn't geared to make you cry and you're just like, that's so beautiful, whatever. Like I didn't do that anymore. And a lot of people that go on HRT for male to female transition do start having those kinds of reactions. Like they start crying at everything. But for me, I had already done that for years. I was an old pro at that. I felt numb. There was a place for a couple of months in there where I felt numb because I was having such productive use of my emotions, for lack of better ways of putting that, that it was almost like I just had a viable outlet. So my palette was enriched in such a way where I could just let the emotions do their thing. Mm-hmm. And then it felt like the room got really quiet, so to speak, because I just, there was a couple of months in there. I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. I feel completely numb. And that was unexpected. It was definitely not what I was told would happen, but for me, that's what happened. And it had to do, and now I just feel really comfortable with my emotions and they just happen. They don't get bottled up. Another thing that happened that's related to this was I would experience emotions weeks or months after the event, and I didn't understand that's what was going on. It took me a long time to figure that out. So if it was a really big emotion, sometimes I would push that down, and then a week later, a month later, it would come up. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know why or where it came from. And then, but that's when my brain is like, okay, let's deal with this now. After I came out, it took a while to get to the place where I would experience the event, have the emotion, and deal with the emotion all at the same time, basically. I mean, deal with it's a big word, but I would at least be able to acknowledge it, know it happened, and feel it, like have within my body that feeling of that emotion. It still took a while to get there, but that window kept shrinking more and more. So it went from a month down to a week, down to a day, down to hours, down to 1 hour, down to a couple minutes, down to instantaneously, like I think is a healthy way to deal with it. And that's the way I deal with it now. And that was a process, but I feel like HRT really got me there, like got me to the place where I was able to really be able to do that effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense, in terms of the expanding emotional palette and just the different ways you were thinking and feeling, how much of that was female hormones versus the absence or suppression of testosterone? And again, that may be impossible to tease out, but
that's great. Well, I can tease it out because after I transitioned physically, my testosterone is completely gone, whereas I was only able to suppress it before. And I can tell you that I think with enough testosterone, you can get through any emotion without addressing it. I feel pretty strongly about that. I think testosterone does a good job of giving you the ability to really put your emotions into a box. Mm-hmm. And for better or for worse, I think there's a survival pattern there. I definitely feel like when I started taking estrogen and progesterone, I was able to have that enriched palette. And I was able to deal with my emotions better. Mm-hmm. I think where the testosterone reduction came in this part of the picture was definitely in turning down the volume. Mm-hmm. So instead of the emotions being like really, I don't want to say intense. That's not the right word. Darn it. What's the right word? Instead of the emotions being big, let's use big. Okay. Instead of the emotions being real big, I still get big emotions, but they're not like so unmanageably big. They don't feel unmanageably big. That's really what I want to say. And that changed after I got bottom surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about surgery in just a sec, but I want to ask another HRT question.
Yeah.
For you, did you feel more feminine, more like a woman simply by doing HRT? I mean, you mentioned feeling more whole, that may be different. I'm wondering if that HRT started to restore you to the feminine, to the woman that you always felt you were, or was it that HRT actually brought a whole new level of sort of gender awareness, femininity, that you thought, oh, this is new, but this is, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally does. It totally does. Okay. So this is, your question made me realize or think of something. Every step along the way, I had expectations. So when I socially transitioned, the first time, this is a really important story for me, at least. And I'll go back to your question. I am answering your question. It's just going to be a little ways to get there. I apologize. When I first started transitioning and the first time I put on a skirt, I felt at home. And I felt like I had come home from a vacation. Like when you're gone for a while, for whatever reason, for months, years, and you finally walk back through the threshold of your home and you longed to be there. That's the way I felt. I felt like I had walked through the threshold back home. And it was a beautiful feeling that I definitely didn't expect that. What I expected was what people told me about being transgender, which was that it was very sexual, that it was going to be very provocative for me or whatever, or it was going to feel very different, whatever, perverse, you name it, all these sorts of things that people told me it was going to be. It was none of those things. And I expected some variation of that because that's what people say. So that's what you expect. It was none of those things. And every time I came to, I'll call it a fork in the road, where I made the decision to take the next step, that was always true. I had expectations or didn't, but whatever I thought was going to happen was vastly different and vastly more shallow than what actually happened. It was deeper and richer and more, I'll say, obvious. It was really more obvious. It's like, oh, no. It's not, this isn't some kind of game or relief of some fetish or whatever. It was coming up for air. It was the next breath. It was something that was just a part of you that you finally got back. And so that was true when I shaved my legs for the first time. That was true when I put on a skirt. That was true with HRT. And it wasn't right away. It wasn't the first pill that I took or whatever. But in that first month, it was obvious. I didn't wake up one day and go, I'm a woman now. I didn't know what to expect. I thought maybe it would make me feel that way, but it didn't. What it made me feel like was I just felt whole. I just felt like I finally got that next breath. Yeah.
What was unexpected, surprising, richer, deeper about the surgical transition?
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to cry again. Okay. So, my expectation is that I would just feel like I could maybe approach sex the right way, or maybe I would just I wouldn't have this bulge in front of me anymore when I had maybe a little bit tighter skirt on or whatever, and have to deal with that or be embarrassed about it, which is a huge relief, by the way, that I don't have to deal with that anymore. But it wasn't really any of that. Like when the doctors took the bandages off and I was able, it's the first time I've really, really unpacked this for someone else. The first time that he pulled the bandage back, I was just blown away at how normal I felt and how normal it felt for my penis not to be there anymore. And for me to have a vagina. And I felt like a person. Like it was the first time I didn't feel like an alien. And I didn't know what that felt like before.
Because that's all you'd ever known.
It's all I'd ever known. And so I couldn't really put words to it until that moment. But in that moment, I knew. I was like, oh, I feel human finally. How weird is that? You know, over 40 years of life. And this is the first time where I can truly say I feel like a person.
That's such a powerful description of it. With HRT, you felt whole. And with surgery, you felt like a human.
Yeah.
You felt like a person.
Yeah.
What does gender mean to you? Or the idea of gender? And I know this is being batted around so much in the media, and this is really at the forefront of public discourse, and there's a lot of heated stuff. But just, I wonder just your experience. Like, what you have lived so many aspects of this idea of gender, and finally now come home to feeling whole and feeling human.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I'll say that wholeness and humanness that I felt was when everything felt more aligned with my gender. And so, there's a couple of camps out there that I think have some validity to them. One is gender is real. And there's people, very conservative people, a lot of times that really want to make a big deal about that. And I'm here to say that that's true. It's real. It's maybe not the way you might expect. Like, I think your 5th grade biology class isn't quite enough to get you there. Like, you need more information. Gender is very real. None of that. I mean, there are people that will argue with me about this, but none of that happened to me could have happened if gender was just some kind of social construct. And so that's the other group. The other side of that spectrum is gender is just a social construct. It's just something we made up. No, it's not. But a lot of the things that we deal with are, pink wasn't always a female color. For example, Barbies, like, boys can play with Barbies and they're still going to be boys. That doesn't make them girls. I was drawn to Barbies because I was a girl. I mean, that's different from, that didn't make me a girl or a boy. Wearing pink clothes doesn't make you a girl or a boy. Liking pink doesn't, none of those are all social constructs. And that really that's really part of, like, for me, kind of what started unraveling things for me. And like, what, okay, I'm tired of following these rules from a pro forma perspective. Like, I would walk into my closet and look at the clothes in my closet and be devastated. I would literally cry. Like, it was depressing for me to go get dressed in the morning. For God's sakes, it's just dumb. Why would you do that to yourself? I did it for years. So yeah, of course, the clothes that are in my closet are socially constructed to be female clothes. If I lived in 17th century Scotland, I would, and I was a male, for example, I would have a kilt on, and that looks a lot like a skirt. And I've even had people tell me, well, that's just female clothes. Like, you can't wear kilts. It's like, well, hello, that is a social construct. So there's a lot about gender that we carry around in our heads that signal gender that's very much a social construct, but it's not all socially constructed.
I think a lot about gender because I see this a lot in my practice, and I've thought, if I were in a cave for 6 months in the dark and I couldn't see myself and just sitting in this cave, how would I know my gender? And I don't think I would. I mean, I could tell, I have a penis, but again, that's not gender.
Right.
But I think it's because, again, I've only ever been this. I'm thinking, so I don't have any.
That's reasonable. I think let's go back to that passage that I read in scripture where that was kind of that watershed for me. Before that point, I would say I had lived in that state where I maybe got pushed around a little bit here and there by my mom being like, oh, you're too much this or you're too much that. But by that point, or any really point, I kind of took what she had to say to me with a grain of salt, other than just let's get along, whatever it took to get along. But that wasn't really instructive from a gender perspective. I really did float. I didn't really have a strong sense of gender until that point for myself. So yeah, I think that's reasonable to assume. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like, it's, as you describe it, it is sociocultural. It is real. It's as real as anything. And it's so, I love the word ineffable, indescribable. Like, how do you describe it? Which then I think sort of flips the other question, because now we're having a lot of people who say, I'm non-gendered, or right, I'm non-binary, which is also really interesting because, as I've argued gender with my family, we all have some spirited arguments. I said, I could almost argue that, because I don't, like, if I had to, if I was testifying my gender in a courtroom, and I had to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and I'd say I'm male, and they'd say, what's your evidence? And I'd be like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. Like, what would I say? Because in some ways, some of my, I have very dear friends that are female. I'm a therapist. I have parts of me are, kind of on the feminine side, the yin side, and then I have some yang stuff. And it's so interesting. And so then when I think of, what does that mean to be non-binary, non-gendered? Because you're someone who early on knew I have a gender, and it's not.
Well, I don't know that I knew early on. I think that's the point. Like, I think I started thinking about it in terms of a binary once I hit that watershed. Before then, I'm not sure. And when I first came out, I was like, well, maybe I'm bigendered. Like, in fact, I definitely landed there for a while because I could feel the maleness in there. That's the weirdest thing you're probably going to hear all day today when you listen to this is I felt that maleness in there, and I couldn't describe it any other way except to use that label. Mm-hmm. And that's really all it is. It's a label. So we're trying to really, I think this is my opinion, just pure opinion now. I think we're trying to just sort it all out, and people get upset at labels. But when we label something, our brain goes, yeah, that's it. Mm. And so for me, for a while, I definitely did feel bigendered because I had pushed against that male perspective and I'll even say male privilege for sure. I definitely took up male privilege, and there was a lot of maleness about me that I had worked on real hard for years because I felt like I had to, and it was hard to let that go. And I didn't feel like I had to let that go. And I felt like that was a part of me. But slowly over time that started to fade. like it became pretty clear. Like it was like, oh yeah, no, I was carrying that, and that was definitely a part of me. And I can still do those things, and I don't need to be male. Like that's okay. I still know how to frame a wall. I don't need to be a guy to do that. Mm-hmm. It's fine. And I can still play the role of father for my children to a degree. I can't. And I never really did as a male parental unit in their lives. I never really functioned in that way. I functioned as someone who brought some of those more stereotypically female characteristics to the parenting game anyway, but I loved being that piece of the puzzle for my kids the best that I could. Mm-hmm. And even that was like, yeah, no, I really wasn't bringing a whole lot of maleness to that. So once I started feeling like I could be really honest with myself and get the right hormones going and just really work through that, through society, through friendships, just kind of living, seeing what that social construct kind of told me back, mm-hmm. It became pretty clear that it's like I'm not bigendered. So it's a process, and I don't know that I should ever really say that it's done and it shouldn't be done, and you shouldn't be afraid of it, mm-hmm. because the more I was allowing myself to explore it and let go of things that I felt like should define me and just let things define me as they were, which is kind of a weird idea, mm-hmm. and hard to follow. But if you think that through for a minute, if you just let yourself define yourself as you are, not as you should be, then you'll find a lot of peace there. And the labeling tends to help. And I wouldn't call myself bi-gendered anymore because I let myself kind of fall through that process.
Are there parts of you that, I don't know if it would be a memory or, but are there parts of you that still feel or seem a little male? So you've, HRT'd and you've done surgery, anatomically, hormonally, you're a woman.
Right.
Yet you socioculturally were seen as male for a long time. So are there vestiges of that you talked about male privilege and just sort of there are ways of being in the world that are very male. And I guess that's maybe different than knowing what male privilege is. But do you understand my question? Like, are there still shadings of yourself, of your gender? You're like, oh yeah, there's still vestiges of male, or do you feel like this has fully brought you into womanhood?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes I grapple with that question actually, because I don't know. I don't know for sure. What I can say about that is I want to say that there aren't, because that's easy. It's easy to explain. It's easy to live through. It's easy to understand for people. And I think at the end of the day, I have to believe that there are some vestiges. Every once in a while, I'm like, ooh, that's a really burly thought. Like, that's a really guy kind of thinking. And it doesn't happen very often. And it never really did. But every once in a while, I'm like, yeah, that was testosterone driven. Or yeah, I'll joke with my friends. I'll be like, yeah, I had a healthy dose of testosterone poisoning, which is not fair to men. I just want to embrace that right now. It's not fair to men.
Because we talk about muscle memory. You could imagine that there could be like psyche memory, that there's almost ways of thinking and being that are, more male, that you just practiced for so long that they just became kind of second nature, even though they weren't your nature. That I just wonder if sometimes, as you said, you find yourself like, oh my gosh, what is that burly? Like, what is that? Like, where did that come from? Where did that come from? Like that.
Maybe every once in a while. It doesn't happen very often, surprisingly enough, which I think is why I feel pretty comfortable not using the bi-gender terminology, or say like demi-female or demi-male or demi-boy, demi-girl, whatever. Anyway, I feel comfortable not using any of those other labels, just female, because for me, that doesn't really happen very often, every once in a while. And it's not like, because I think because my maleness was so forced, that never really reared its ugly head all that much. Mostly for me, it was kind of just letting that programming go of like, oh, I'm supposed to be X, Y, and Z. I'm supposed to do or be or think or say X, Y, and Z. I thought I would have to learn how to act female, and maybe people look at me and go, she doesn't have that figured out yet. But it feels like that all comes pretty natural to me, and nobody really calls me on the carpet too much for that. So yeah, which is interesting, because I was worried about that at first, because I didn't want to like take up the mantle. Here's something, if you don't mind. I don't know how much time we got, but
yeah, we'll probably start wrapping up in a minute. But I want to hear this.
Yeah. So one of the things when I first came out, and I'm like, what do I do with this? I am terrified that I am going to come across like I'm pretending to be a woman. And I did enough pretending to be a man that I'm not interested in that. So I don't want to do it wrong, and I don't want to be offensive. Like, I was really worried about like going into female spaces. So like, I understand the whole issue that some people have with trans women being in traditionally woman spaces or bathrooms, etc. Like, I get it as a philosophy, because when I was going through my transition, I really wanted to be sensitive to that idea of like, well, maybe I'm really not, I really had to grapple with that. And now I know I am, but I had to grapple with it. And before I really figured that out, it's like, well, I don't want to have to learn how to do that. And so, and I don't want to offend people. But none of that really, what I found over time was none of that really panned out. Like I didn't really have to learn how to be a woman. And maybe I suck at it. I don't think so. I think I'm all right. Like, I don't want to bring male privilege into that space, for example. And I do feel like what I'll say is I do feel like I learned how to operate with male privilege for sure. And I used to fight that concept hardcore. Like, no, there's no such thing as privilege, blah, blah, blah. We're all equal. Great, fine. And I definitely had privilege. I definitely picked it up. I definitely used it. And that helped me get to where I am today, in fact, in my career, et cetera, to some degree. And I can embrace all of that and say that happened. And I definitely don't want to bring that into female spaces. And I definitely don't want to bring that into spaces where I'm representing women. I don't want to talk over women. I want to make sure that I'm a good feminist, and in all of its glory, I need to learn those things. And I think everyone does, like, because we're just so ingrained in our culture. Men and women are ingrained in our culture to be anti-feminist to a large degree. And so I hesitate to use all of that language in those words because they're so charged in our culture. But really all I'm saying is like, we really need to listen to women when they speak.
What do I take from Autumn's story? Well, first, that gender is real. And it's a sociological construct. And it's a way to signal identity. And it's influenced by hormones. And gender identity and presentation can evolve over time. And it's all super complicated, almost a hall of mirrors. For the more thoughtfully we try to use words to describe our gender, the more we find that words fail us, and we fall back on this sense of knowing. Maybe gender is an ineffable, indescribable thing. And for this reason, maybe we all need to try to have more empathy and compassion for each other as we try to sort this whole thing out.